We are very honored that the Honorable Paul Hellyer has consented to do an interview with us here at Area 51 Magazine because we've been following his disclosure statement from the symposium here in Toronto. And I wanted to ask him a few questions because so many of us are curious why the Honorable Paul Hellyer would even come out with using terms that are so unpopular in politics. So I think we'll start by asking him, when did you get interested in the whole entire UFO field? When were you curious about what was in the skies? Was it when you were working as defense minister? Was that a curiosity? Was it when you were young? When was it?
Not really. It's very recent. When I was Minister of National Defense, I had reports crossing my desk about sightings, but they just indicated whether or not there was some natural explanation or whether there wasn't. And I was far too busy at the time to worry about it very much because I was the Minister who unified the Canadian Armed Forces, the Royal Canadian Navy, the Royal Canadian Air Force, and the Canadian Army into a single armed force, and this was really, unprecedented in the Western world. And Robert McNamara, who was the U.S. Secretary of Defense at the time, said this is what all the ministers wanted to do, but didn't have the guts to do. But so this was it was war really to accomplish this.
This was McNamara under Kennedy. Was it Kennedy administration?
Right,
okay.
Right.
So it was the 60s.
Yeah. So this was in the 1960s, and so I was just too busy to be curious about UFOs and other things. So it was only, I suppose, in very recent times when some friends have started sending me things, and frankly I usually was too busy to read them, or thought I was, and I kept putting them off and putting them on the shelf for future reference. And I must admit that it was only after I took Colonel Corso's book to my little lodge in Muskoka a year ago and sat down and read it that it really tweaked my interest, because I knew right away that it was real. And I said, hey, this is something that I want to find out about because it's important and there are a lot of policy issues that I'm going to have to think about.
This book, who gave it to you?
I guess it was Pierre Junot.
Okay.
Pierre Junot has been sending me quite a bit of stuff, and he's very judicious. He knows that I'm overloaded, and you looked at my desk earlier, so you know that it's true. And
but you're an activist. You're in many areas.
Well, that's true. Yes, and just going night and day. People ask me what I do now that I'm retired, and I said, well, the only difference is I only work 6 days a week now. But and it's more or less true. But I read that, and I knew that it was authentic. I asked myself, would anyone be capable of making that in fiction? Because I only read a few books a year. The previous year I read The Life of Pi when I was on my vacation. And it was so convincing that I couldn't make up my mind 100% until right at the end whether it was fact or fiction. And I said, is there any possibility that this book could be fiction? And the answer that I concluded was no, it couldn't, because there are too many times, too many places, too many names, and too many references that I understand and know, and as a former Minister of National Defense, would recognize as being legitimate. But I can't dismiss this. This is the real thing. And so all of a sudden I became deeply interested and, may I say, deeply concerned.
Okay, and I also know, because it was part of a story that was written about you, that you called, I think it was a 4-star general in the United States, to confirm that what Colonel Corso was saying was
Well,
possible.
I'm not at liberty to say who it was or how many stars he had, but when I was reading the book, my nephew came along and asked me what I was reading, and I told him. And so he was, like a large proportion of the population, a skeptic, and didn't mind admitting it. So he went away and he was only there for a few days. And I guess a couple of weeks later, he phoned me and said I'd been talking to my friend, the retired general, and I told him about this book. And he said, quote, "Every word is true and more," end of quote. And he said, "Now, I want to get my hands on that book."
Well, the book was a bestseller, and it did come out programmed for the 50th anniversary of the Roswell crash.
Right.
And we have groups that believe that Roswell didn't even happen, where Colonel Corso in the book and in The Dawning of a New Age, which are his original notes, he talks about seeing a body at Fort Riley. Not just his work at the Pentagon, it's the fact that he did see also an alien body, which is very important. So you're telling me that this changed the way you thought about a lot of things, and you were curious, and you also considered it serious. Did you consider it serious because it's a matter of national security, or did you consider it serious because as a human being it changed the way you looked at the world?
It made me very curious and concerned, because I understand policy issues when they stare me in the face. And so I said, there are all kinds of policy issues here. First of all, General Nathan Twining, right at the beginning, designated these people as enemy aliens. And so my first question is, are they still designated enemy aliens? Because if they are, then the United States Armed Forces are preparing to kill them. And I asked myself, well, if they start taking on a superior technology, what is going to happen? Are they just going to take it, or are they going to retaliate? What are the consequences of such a thing for the United States, for the world? And I think it's just absolutely tremendously important. And then, of course, other policy considerations are, well, if this technology is so absolutely wonderful, it has the makings of saving our planet from environmental destruction. We could get away from burning fossil fuels and save the ozone layer and stop the melting of the ice caps and the raising the water levels worldwide, and stop disrupting the weather patterns in a way that have really upset a lot of people, or upsetting people more, I think, than perhaps they are willing to admit. And so this is tremendously important too, number two. And the third one, of course, is it sort of reinforces, because I know that the officials are not telling the truth about Roswell. I know that. I heard some of them on television not too long ago, where some of the party line was still, well, it was a weather balloon. I heard dozens of other people saying they'd been sworn to secrecy. I said, wait a minute, give me a break. You're swearing people to secrecy because a weather balloon crashes? Talk about...
It's not logical, yeah.
Well, it's not credible, So when we're talking about these things, they can accuse people who say that the crash was real, not being credible, but I would say the people who say that it was a weather balloon are by no means credible. So I said to myself, this really, the whole cover-up, because I'm convinced that there has been a systematic, thorough, and very successful cover-up for half a century or more. The whole cover-up really lends credence to Lapham's theory of the two governments. I suspect you're familiar with that. But
the shadow government and the real government?
He calls the real and the provisional, or the permanent and the provisional.
Right.
And he says that the United States government, the permanent government, is the Fortune 500 list, and the top legal firms in Washington that do their legal work, and the top PR companies that do their public relations or propaganda, if you want to be a little more vulgar about it, and the top civil servants, both military and civil. And they run the United States. And every few years, and here I paraphrase a little bit with the license that I have as a former politician, they have a charade called an election. And the permanent government picks the actors to go